Chapter 5 of Nicholas, a Manhattan Christmas Story by Carroll Moore. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Bowling Green and the Battery.
"Let's keep on down to Bowling Green and look for St. Nicholas where Olaf the Dreamer saw him,"
said John Moon with a beaming smile, and they passed through the gates of Old Trinity and turned down Broadway.
"Who was Olaf the Dreamer?"
asked Nicholas.
"Will you tell me about him, John Moon?"
"Olaf was a countryman of yours, Nicholas. That famous race of Knickerbockers Washington Irving tells about. His real name was Olaf von Kortlandt, and he longed for lands of his own, for he possessed none in the old world. Olaf had an amazing talent for dreaming and for making his dreams come true. Irving says he was the first great land speculator in these parts."
The sun had gone down, but sunset lights were still in the sky, and a fresh wind was blowing up from the harbor. Lower Broadway was deserted at that hour, and as he walked along, listening to John Moon's story of Olaf the Dreamer, it seemed to Nicholas that he could see that old Dutch ship, the Goede Vrouw, with the image of St. Nicholas at her bow, sail slowly out from the harbor of Amsterdam in Holland, over the same sea he had just crossed, through the Narrows, and up the bay to the exact spot where he had landed that very Christmas Eve.
"Your countrymen landed in New Jersey first,"
John Moon was saying.
"They were planning to build a great Dutch city over in Pavonia, as New Jersey was then called. But Olaf told him that St. Nicholas had appeared to him in a dream the night before, and told him to look for a better site for the new city. They were all very much impressed by Olaf's dream, and an expedition was at once fitted out to explore the coast. Olaf was commodore of this voyage, and he set forth in the jolly boat of the Goede Vrouw, the squadron of 3 canoes. As they were coasting along past Governor's Island, a school of jolly porpoises came rolling and tumbling by. Olaf hailed the porpoises with joy, for he looked upon the appearance of these round fat fish, burgomasters among fish, he called them, as a happy omen of the success of the undertaking, and directed his squadron to steer in their track. The porpoises gave them a lively voyage up East River, where the rapid current seized the tub of the jolly boat, whirled it about, and hurried it forward with such velocity that Olaf believed they were in the hands of some supernatural power, and that the porpoises were towing them to a fair haven, where all their wishes and expectations would be realized. Borne on by the resistless current, they doubled the point of land we call Collier's Hook, and drifted into a sunny lake, to which they gave the name of Kip's Bay, in honor of the valiant Hendrik Kip at the bow of the jolly boat. A sudden turning of the tide drove them to land at Bellevue, where they held a council dinner, in the course of which the great family feud between the Tenbrooks and the Hardenbrooks broke out. Olaf put an end to their lively and interesting dispute by deciding to explore still further in the track of the porpoises. The tide having turned in their favor, they coasted along by Blackwell's Island, admiring the beauties of the fair island of Mannahatta, with its great tulip trees rising from forests of oak and chestnut and elm, until they came to a lovely woodland vista through which they looked toward Haarlem and Morrisania. The sun had gone down, and they drifted quietly on, in the purple haze of a spring twilight, until they were suddenly roused by the violent tossing of their boats. Great waves were boiling and foaming about them. Olaf bawled aloud to put about, but his words were lost in the roaring of the waters. The winds howled, the waters raged, and those infamous rocks, the hen and chickens, nearly sealed the fate of the heroes of Pavonia. But worse was yet to come. Into that tremendous whirlpool, the jolly boat was drawn, and there whirled about until Commodore von Kortlandt and his crew were completely overpowered by the horror of the scene and the strangeness of the revolution. When they came to their senses, they found themselves stranded on the Long Island shore, and Olaf told many wonderful stories of his adventures in the pot, how he saw spectres flying in the air and heard the yelling of hobgoblins, and put his hand into the pot where they whirled about, and found the water scalding hot, and beheld strange beings sitting on rocks, skimming with ladles. Most of all he enjoyed telling that he saw the porpoises who had betrayed them into this peril, some broiling on the gridiron, and others hissing on the frying pan. Having made his escape from its terrors, Olaf naturally wished to give an appropriate name to this perfidious strait. They called it Hellegat, the Hell Gate. The devil had been seen there, it is said, sitting astride of the hog's back, playing on the fiddle or boiling fish before a storm. Olaf and his remaining followers, for the squadron had been totally dispersed by the disaster, decided they would never do to found a city in so diabolical a neighborhood. They made up their minds to roam no more, and they steered their course back, fully determined to build the Dutch city of their dreams in the marshy region of Pavonia, where they had first landed. But just as they sighted the familiar shores of their own village of Communipaw, Commodore von Kortlandt's tub was rolled high and dry on the point of an island which divided the bosom of the bay. Olaf looked about and saw that the shore of this island abounded with oysters, and he at once decided to celebrate his wonderful escape from Hellegate with a banquet. Invitations admitting of no refusal were dispatched to the oysters. A fire was made at the foot of a tree, and all hands fell to roasting and broiling and stewing and frying, and a sumptuous feast was soon set forth. Olaf ate profoundly, and when he had finished, he sank down upon the green turf, and a deep sleep stole upon him. And the sage Olaf dreamed a dream, and lo, the good St. Nicholas came riding over the tops of the trees in that self-same wagon wherein he brings his yearly presents to children, and he descended, and lit his pipe by the fire, and sat himself down and smoked. And as he smoked, the smoke from his pipe rose into the air and spread like a cloud overhead. And Olaf bethought him, and he hastened and climbed up to the top of one of the tallest trees, and saw the smoke spread over a great extent of country. And as he considered it more attentively, he fancied the great volume of smoke assumed a variety of marvelous forms. Palaces, domes, and lofty towers appeared and then faded away, till the whole cloud rolled off, and nothing but the green woods were left. And when St. Nicholas had smoked his pipe, he twisted it in his hatband, and laying his finger beside his nose, gave the astonished Van Cortlandt a very significant look, and then mounting his wagon, he disappeared over the tree-tops. And Van Cortlandt awoke from his sleep greatly instructed, and he roused his companions and related his dream, and interpreted it to be the will of St. Nicholas that they should settle down and build a city here, and that the smoke of the pipe was the type of how vast would be the extent of the city. Having accomplished their purpose, the voyagers returned merrily to Communipaw, where they were received with great rejoicings. A general meeting was called of all the wise men of Pavonia, and when they had listened to the whole history of the voyage into Olaf's dream, they began at once to prepare to move from the green shores of Pavonia to the pleasant island of Mannahatta. The grand moving, as it was called, took place upon May Day, and after they had bought Manhattan Island from the Indians, had built a fort and a trading house and some houses to live in. Your countrymen built a chapel to the good St. Nicholas on the spot where it appeared to Olaf the Dreamer, the very spot where we are now standing, Nicholas,
said John Moon, for they had entered Bowling Green Park, and Nicholas was staring straight ahead at the custom house.
What a perfectly wonderful Christmas story, John Moon,
he exclaimed.
And you told most of it in Irving's own words,
said Anne Carraway.
You must have learned it by heart.
I suppose I do know that story almost by heart,
John Moon responded.
I never tried telling it before, but I liked it so much the first time I fished it out of Knickerbocker that the words stuck along with the story.
Was Washington Irving named for George Washington?
asked Nicholas.
It really was, Nicholas,
said John Moon.
When General Washington entered New York with his army, there was a little baby in a house not far from Old Trinity, whose mother settled the question of his name by saying, Washington's work has ended, and the child shall be named after him. This boy was 6 years old when George Washington came back to New York as a President of the United States. Thanks to the enterprise of Lizzie, a Scottish maid in the Irving household, little Washington was presented to his great namesake. Lizzie wasted no time in formalities, but followed the President to his shop one morning, and saluted him, saying, Please, your honor, pointing to the little boy, here's a baron as was named after you. And Washington placed his hand on Washington Irving's head and gave him his blessing.
He must have been very proud of his name after that,
said Nicholas.
He was proud of it,
John Moon replied.
But Washington Irving was too full of fun and mischief when he was a boy to tell how much he really cared. He became a famous traveler, Nicholas, and began to travel as soon as he could walk. The town crier was always bringing him home from his explorations of Manhattan Island, and as he grew older, he wandered further away, up the Hudson to the Catskill Mountains, or down to the piers to watch the ships.
"Shall we go and watch the ships ourselves?"
said Anne Carraway.
"The lights are coming on all over the harbor now."
Why, there's the funny round house I ran around,"
exclaimed Nicholas as they crossed Battery Park.
"It looks like a fort from here."
Our government did build it for a fort,
said John Moon.
but the fort wasn't needed very long, so it was turned into a great pleasure palace called Castle Garden, with a bridge leading out to it from the mainland. A famous party was given there in honor of Lafayette, and years afterward, Barnum brought Jenny Lind over from Sweden to sing in Castle Garden. People came from all over the country just to hear her sing and to walk on the Battery, which was the fashionable promenade in those days.
"Do they have parties in the roundhouse now?"
asked Nicholas.
Marvelous parties.
John Moon replied.
Blue angel fishes, red-breasted sunfishes, telescope goldfishes, and rainbow trout swim around the boxes and balconies where people used to sit and listen to Jenny Lind, while seals and sea lions, alligators and crocodiles, turtles and bullfrogs slip and slide and hop and glide over the old ballroom floor. All the fishes and sea animals live in the roundhouse now, and we call their palace the aquarium.
"Are there any porpoises?"
asked Nicholas.
Sometimes,
replied John Moon.
but porpoises are not very fond of living in a palace. They like to be on the move.
"Exploring the coast for Olaf, or signaling ships, I suppose,"
said Nicholas.
"I saw lots of them coming over."
"The nicest time of all to visit the fishes,"
said Anne Carraway,
"is when the sun is shining straight into their palace windows. Then you can watch the gayest ones of all slip into one lovely ball dress after another, while the old sea lion mounts his platform and calls the dances from the ballroom floor. Beau Gregory of the Bermudas leads off with Queen Trigger in her royal purple and gold. Then little Half Moon comes dancing along with her other half, both in exquisite silver blue, carrying the tiny ladders they brought with them from South America, and looking back over their shoulders to watch the Japanese goldfish spreading fan tails and fringe tails to the sound of sea music. Faster than you can count, Nicholas, they come to the ball. Blue parrots and rabbit fish, red snappers and spot snappers with old Sergeant Major, moonfish and foolfish, puffers and blowers with Cow Pilot as leader, nurse sharks and surgeons, and hundreds of others, and after them all ride the seahorses."
"I'm coming down to the roundhouse the first sunny day,"
exclaimed Nicholas, and as they walked back across Battery Park, he said to himself,
"I wonder what the fishes do Christmas Eve."
End of chapter 5.